on some stuff. Do you want me to keep talking on the one or?
Yeah, perfect. This is just general conversation. Yeah. Because I mean, you're dropping so many awesome stories. Like last time we talked for 3 hours, I was like, man, like I wish we got this because I want to relive those 3 hours. That was so great.
That's it. Well, thank you. I've said that. So I don't know if I mentioned this to you last time. So I worked with Sylvester Stallone on his brand. So when I was at GNC running the brand food and beverage division, there was some. You'd have just every brand wanted to talk to you, right? I didn't have time, so you'd kind of work through brokers. And sports nutrition had a lot of people had left GNC at that time, and so one of the roles I had was to get people back in, legitimate sports nutrition companies back in. It's one reason why I was brought in after running that ABB company and like all the distributors. So back then it was a little bit different. Not a little bit. It was a lot different industry, far more like concentrated in where you had to take your products, distribution style. And we set up, we launched, Stallone wanted to do a brand. Some friends of mine who I ended up, after we launched Stallone's brand in GNC as an exclusive, after GNC sold a second time, I left and went and I ended up consulting with these guys and working with Stallone, who, by the way, is just like one of the like most awesome celebrities like you're gonna meet. I mean, like, because he's just legit. Like he loves the iron jungle, right, of weight training. And he's also, I think, because he struggled so much in his early life and he did not have like the greatest upbringing. He's got a good heart for other people. I mean, the time he would take to talk to you. So when you say like you wish you had recorded the other to relive it, I can remember. So I'd worked with him, been at his house. We talked many times. A lot of a lot of back history. My master's degree, I think I told you, is boxing and weight training with Roy Jones Jr. and his, obviously with Rocky. We talked about that. Back in those days, my wife and I did a lot of climbing. Like indoor rock climbing was usually our date night. Obviously with Cliffhanger, we talked about that. But we also shared the same birthday. But someday maybe I'll be as successful as him. One day, so when I was after I'd fast forward and after I was editor in chief of the magazines, we had done some covers with him and Gunnar Peterson. I think I talked to you about before. I'd put him under contract when I was editor in chief and did my PhD program at the same time because Gunnar had just, I mean, he's the OG when it comes to celebrity trainers, and just became friends with him, and we could use like, his clients he was working with, and it was awesome. And so anyway, I went to go see Gunnar one time. I was in town. I had moved away from LA, and but I was back, visiting somebody, maybe Joe Weider, definitely visiting him at one point, and then went to Gunnar's studio, and Gunnar was training somebody, but Stallone was just in there working out, right? And I said hi, made some cordiality, and then, even though I talk a lot, obviously, I asked him a question. I said, I think I read where you were in like Russia doing, filming for Expendables 2. And that opened up 90 minutes of just stories from, like, I say this often. I wish I had tape, like caught it on tape or had my, phone rolling. I've never been good about that. You go back to look when I ran the magazines, I never did photos with, the people on the cover. I just thought it was, ridiculous. But that moment, like the stories were amazing. I felt like, he took the time to just chat and it was just surreal. And there's been other moments in my life, like having those conversations with people that you're like, oh, could you do that again? Like, but as we talk, Mike, and you want to, eventually have, marry, have kids. It's, I say the same about my own kids, I wish I could go back and relive those moments. I wish we could, but that's the life part, right? So realize it's fleeting. So take advantage of it when you're in the moment. So.
Do you think that someone, because you've been around a lot of, I mean, you're a successful person and you've been around a lot of successful people in academia and industry. Bodybuilding, we went into a lot of stuff about Arnold and Joe Weider and muscle and fitness, and just really some brilliant stories you told. Do you think that there's a beauty and a nostalgia of looking back and seeing where you started and now looking at where you are now? Like, because I always try and give myself like advice of what would I do 10 years ago when I was 20. And I was on like a sophomore, junior in college. I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
relax, Mike. It would have been okay. Just keep studying. You can retake organic chemistry. But at the time, I'm freaking out, But like, I kind of want those moments back when I see my students at 20. I'm like, man, like, enjoy this. Do you have that feeling as well?
Is there a beauty? I mean, that's not the word I would typically. I think you're more apt to hear me. Like I love looking back at stories. I mean, I think I used the term to you before. It's I've worked with the famous and the infamous. There's definitely learning experiences. Again, it seems surreal when you consider the jobs that I've had and the people and the experiences I've been blessed to have. Now I've worked hard, right? I mean, like you create for those of us that work that aren't handed, obviously you work at them, and I'm grateful to everybody who helped open doors. I think that there's two lessons that I guess if you're and I'm going to probably stumble through this because I don't think I've been asked it the way you've asked to say, you know, there's a lot of times where I've grown more aware of what maybe biblically the lesson we're to be taught from the story of Lot and his wife, who becomes a pillar of salt when she looks back at, leaving Sodom, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Town they were fleeing from, I can't recall. Because, we are, if you are constantly looking back at what you've left and you're thinking like, man, I miss that. You can often be, arrested in development, as I mentioned before, one of my favorite shows. But arrested in development and moving forward, and you're going to miss the opportunities that God's placing in front of you at the moment, and what these experiences behind you, positive and negative, and whatever got you with your feet moving in this other direction. You may miss some of these opportunities if you just keep thinking about the what if and I wish and all those things. And I've done it and I do it. It's one of the I think that's they used to call it midlife crisis, but it is for people that are depressed, that run into whether it's other relationships or whatever, is that we often fail to appreciate what we've got. I mean, classic song, right? You don't know what you got till it's gone, and so looking back at things, I would say, yeah, there's times I'll look back, great nostalgia, great laughs with friends, definitely the learning experience that then you take in to other things, and I'm super appreciative. The friends that I've met along the way, the things, the people that have hopefully helped in different points of my life, good, bad, wherever I've been. The thing I'm always aware of just on a personal level, because ever since I was young I've just struggled with falling into a severe depression, is because I will hyper focus and try to kind of replay how would you do it differently. And that's part of like the paralysis by analysis, right? Is of trying to do something right, to what you want it to be, is you can kind of spin through those wheels. And so it's finding that happy medium. I mean, it's kind of good to look back and say, okay, here's what I've learned. These are great. I'm not sure if I would use the term. I definitely have never used the term the beauty of it. I would I would say sometimes it's dark and evil. I mean, because of how, depending on the moment I've been in and what I'm going through, that like you look at like, man, had I done this at this point, had I done this at this point, and as we find always, right, that's the physics of time, is the one thing you can't go back and alter. And so that's super cool. I mean, like there's so many cool stories So when I get around certain people who I've known at different parts, and you start going down those memory lanes, I mean, they're fun. I mean, they're fun. They're hilarious. There's different characters, the usuals. Then you start seeing there's a lot of reruns too. I gotta say, I mean, when you've been in this industry, you see the dime a dozen trainers, who, they look the right part, they know the right words, and you see that in the marketing, the different business. I mean, they say all the right things, or they at least throw out catchwords, but there's no substance to anything they do. You know what I mean? Like, there's no output that has any kind of buildable value. They're not there building up other people. It's just pure job protection for them. And so that's the one thing I do like. I mean, you see it enough. You're like, okay, you can spot them fast, and you can be like, prioritize, and kind of maybe it makes you more efficient. It's probably why like old people are like, they don't have a filter. I had a filter, years ago. Don't have time for that anymore. Like, I know what's about to come. So,
What would you say to maybe yourself or someone who you were, I guess, guiding along, who's interested in this exercise science, sports nutrition, exercise physiology world, who might be in undergrad right now, maybe high school, maybe just a young person that you've learned from? I don't know, because like, I'm going to gain a lot of, wisdom from what you say, and then the people who I follow as well, and some of my students. So what are some things that you've learned you could pass on?
yeah, I'd say, be humble would be the first thing. We've got a lot of self-professed experts. You name it, whether it's training, it's the do this, do that, because it's the simple way to get, I mean, in this day and age, but it's always been there, of getting people to listen to you, because most people don't want to look at the depth of the gray zone of, well, it's this, but this, right? I mean, so I'd say be humble, and then look, you know, for always learning. I mean, it's the one thing that, I don't think it's wrong to have that imposter syndrome as your guide, to be like, I don't know enough. I don't know enough. And then you go and you seek out experts, and you're not seeking them out to be able to use them for what you don't know. You're trying to grow. And I think good people that are there to help make everybody, shine, and everybody improve. I mean, it's like any other friendship, right? I mean, it should be symbiotic. There should be a benefit. I'd say to tell those people, go look for people in areas like you find interesting, like things that you might want to do, and learn from them, and be open to internships. I mean, that's like I started, 2 internships out of the Austin facility lab, and with the UHP lab up in the Bentonville area, I've got where I'll continue to bring in, 2, call it internships, but they're, paid research assistants during every study, and to teach them, because I think there's too many people, and this is a sociology discussion, right? I mean, is that there are people who, and too many, that just want to take advantage of every opportunity in its worst possible way, right? You meet somebody and all they care about is, what can I get out of this person, right? Um, and that's an unfortunate reality. And they will happily serve those people up, I would say. But those people, in my experience, they consistently get found out. I mean, they have one cycle to do that, and you have a reputation. You get a reputation, to be an honest, trustworthy, transparent, like authentic person who tries to help others, and is, who does like help serve once. Because once you prove yourself wrong in that to people, it's, especially now, it's a small world. And so be cautious on that. Like, understand that you have your goals. Somebody else has their goals. Somebody else family. You want to, start a family and raise. I mean, it's and look for those people who I would offer to look for people who are authentic. Find people who truly are. There's a lot of people in our space that, they the definition of, where con man came from is you speak things so loud with confidence that people believe you, right? I mean, this is Catch Me If You Can, Leonardo DiCaprio world now for us, right? Is that you just got to put on the right attire, make good videos, and say stuff loud, and happen to get in with at least one or two people that might help elevate you, and those people can become just obscenely out there. Now, I believe in redemption. I believe there's people who maybe they start out their career and they make those types of mistakes, and they step on people, good folks along the way. But invariably, I've chosen not to trust those folks. If I'm going back to somebody, if I'm talking to somebody new into the space now, and they're like, "Hey, I'd love to get into the nutrition, dietary supplement side of the industry, or do something more in the fitness industry, or academia, whatever it is, research." I mean, look for those people that are doing things that you recognize as like, this is something I would like to do, right? And then become a scholar in it. I mean, learn about the things that go into it, seek out those people, go to those conferences where these people are going to go. If there's internships, intern, right? I mean, if there's opportunities to learn and like at a paid level, do that. If there's ways to collaborate with somebody and become, basically, a somebody's understudy on something. I mean, I don't think that has changed since the dawn of time of sword makers. Is that there's got to be those people that you go look for that are true mentors that can help along the path. I mean, again, it assumes the good of both parties, that there is a teacher who wants to truly help make that path easier. And then there is, that there is also then the student who is trying to truly learn and have a mentor that, that they can, that mentor too can learn from. I mean, and they both grow along the process. I mean, you're going to find when you become a dad that, that's as much education as a dad, from your kids. And there's so much of that reminder of life that, and in the best sense of it. So, but yeah, I'd say and don't assume, I think this is, I mean, my career would be a great example of this, Mike, is that, I mean, my career was not linear, and it's rare. Like, you see a lot of people who will go to college and do their undergrad and then do their graduate and then do their PhD and then they're in academia, right? I mean, I'm not saying that's bad. I think I told you, like, I played, midfield and like sweeper in soccer, and not, probably there's a control, probably because of I'm a control freak at some level, I'm sure. But if you've got the legs and you got the endurance, you can run the whole field. You can be anywhere in support. But I do think experiencing that, understanding the other things that go into it, if you truly want to master some trade or just find something out, I think, the more experience in all those little tangential areas is great. I think I told you the last time we chatted that when I went from the magazine side to the nutrition side my first time around, back when I was, still only had a master's degree, and when went from, the Weeder publications, and then Joe Weeder, went out to had me go out to the nutrition side, and back when Weeder nutrition was big, and I worked in like every department for a couple of weeks, and just really understood, from shipping, receiving, the analytical, the quality control, to the R&D, to the bar manufacturing line, the blending for the powder and the filling, and all that goes into it. I didn't spend any time in accounting, apparently, because maybe I'd be better with my own finances. But the Joe, I think, saw that as far as like, hey, I want you to learn the business. So, and he wanted me to write an article on it, on like all the steps, and that was definitely a part of it. But what I gathered from that also was something I think a lot of people fail to ever do, is get true perspective of the other things involved in a process and a project, and like what are those areas that you're asking of other people, that because there's no job that I'm aware of that lives 100% in a silo, I mean, unless you're I don't even know what you would be. I don't even know what you would be. Like where you don't depend on somebody at some other level, right? Where you to go buy something and you have to understand like the time it takes to build something. I mean, and so I think, so things like that where you go and you learn. And what I found was, is I loved writing. When I was at the magazine, enjoyed things to deal with that. You learn different areas. When I went to the nutrition side and running brands, that from the marketing side and the sales and listening, going out into the field and the distributors, like what is their main ask. Having run gyms, you see it from that perspective, like there is a certain need at the very retail level, and then going to GNC and seeing it at that level, like how does this all kind of work together, and then all the other roles from I've played is just like I've been able to take that and hopefully have the ability to see the I don't know, I want to use the term stress, but what is it that other people are having to deal with to get to this kind of final product that consumers expect, and it gives you a lot of empathy, and sympathy with people on time and workload, and just like with your work, right? I mean, I had assumed it would be easy to be a professor. Like, I mean, so when, a certain stage of my life, I needed to take a break from the industry and getting beat up and financially, getting taken advantage of, I thought I'll go be a teacher, I mean, I realized, oh my gosh, I am not a good teacher. Now I am not a good full-time teacher. And so, but I wouldn't have known that had I not experienced it. So I could understand, okay, I understand like what are your other priorities. And so when I'm communicating with, research professors, when I'm doing studies for university, I have a little bit better sense of like all of that's being asked of you at your side. And so hopefully that makes me a better partner in whatever we do business in. And I would say that for anybody that's starting out, like, I mean, just gather the more you can gather and assume you're never the expert. I mean, I appreciate you saying, being complimentary of where I'm at and successful, but I still don't feel that. I still feel like I have to learn more. I still feel like there's so much more stuff to learn, and there's so many brilliant people out there that I want to learn from. And I would hope to the day I die, I'm still trying to learn new stuff. And so I would say that that'd be my advice. Just keep looking at learning, and try to find maybe some people that are themselves lifetime learners. They're going to be at least it's a more fulfilling, people to work for, because I think they have a little bit more of an empathetic heart, towards people that are trying to learn, and mistakes are going to happen always, 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 always. I say that like when we do a study, and the last two interns, the veterans that came and helped, we go through these kind of several days, and we put ourselves through the process, or understand what we're going to be asking of the subject. So like 6x10 sprint intervals, and everything else, so, but you do that like repeatedly so that when you are doing actual data collection, and not if, but when things mess up, or something happens, you don't freak out. It is just life. I mean, so you go, okay, how should we handle it? I think giving people that like understanding that I don't ask anybody to be. The only person I ever, unfortunately, have like asked to be perfect all the time is myself. You can read onto that however you want on a psychology couch, but but with others, it's, hey, here's what we need to get done. Here's what I ask of you, and just keep learning and keep like proactively learning. I want to give you like a piece of this, and then go do it. People that are new in it, the struggle I find, having done so many different roles and communicating with people in different positions, is a lot of people, and I know I probably did I don't think I was as bad about this. I think I was always pretty good with taking, listening to people that were farther along in their career than me. But you do find a lot of people don't want to receive. I don't want to say criticism because it's the wrong word, but other opinions on a topic that may not reflect what you've already preconceived. I would go into when I was editor in chief at the magazines. Don't mind saying anymore. I'm certain I wasn't the most liked in the building, right? I mean, in my own staff of what we had, 50 or whatever people, because I had my own opinions on what I wanted to do. A lot of these people had been there. The brands had been failing. They were losing readership, and they, of course, always blame it on just one person. It's like a sports team. Oh, it's the manager. It's the manager. Could also be the players. Could also be the players. They're the ones on the field, right? I mean, I've watched a lot of games where Walter Payton back in the day had a horrible offensive line, and that guy could turn some crazy yards out of no help, right? I mean, so, I got there and they'd gotten rid of the one, and then I start pushing to do changes, uh, and we'd have meetings. And I love creative meetings. Let's come up with ideas for the issue, come up with ideas for the article. Let's come up with what do we want visually. And so I love that process of everybody giving input. Now I've got strong opinions, and so I'll give strong opinions. And if you don't come back to me with your own opinion and the rationale behind it, anybody that knows me knows I'm quite thorough. Hence why I've been chatting so much to answer one question of yours. But there's not too many people who are going to go into as much depth as I do, as far as making sure I've looked at the perspective on something so that I can give an opinion. So if you're going to say your opinion, I don't think is right, I want to hear your rationale, because I know I've given mine, like why I think this would work. And one of my favorite compliments I still is my executive editor, Mike Carlson, would always say, is as the one boss that, yeah, you have strong opinions, but anytime where somebody came back with something that you heard and liked that whatever reason, I thought was quote unquote better, or they had a good justification. I was quick to be like, that's the best idea, right? That's what we're going to do. You see there's a lot of bosses who will say that's what they want. I want to hear people okay, now, tell me what's wrong with this idea. I will say, in my experience, it's not something that a lot of bosses want to hear, and so, now, a lot of people will criticize things. So I would say that to newcomers, it's okay to criticize, but only if you have a solution and only if you have a rationale, right? I mean, I say this to my, kids as well. It's you take responsibility, say you're sorry and be done. If you have something that you want to do, that's different from what we're doing, let us know what it is and why. Right? So, and say the same in work is go out, learn, listen, and contribute, and be proactive. You see what things are exciting to you, and go, I want to be an expert in this. And you may never become an expert in that, but if your pursuit is to become an expert in that, you're going to read these things, you're going to go down rabbit holes, you're going to go in and do these other meetings and learn these other areas that are going to contribute in some way. And even if it's just one little thing, that guy Gunnar Peterson, right? I mean, the trainer. I mean, one of the greatest things I remember him telling me one time, because we always saw these trainers, that think of themselves as experts, and they're not out getting certified anymore, and they're not doing, so they do their own thing, and that's what they got to do, and whatever. I mean, I've seen them cycle through this process, many times in my career. I always loved this. One thing Gunnar had said one time, he's I go to every one of these conferences. I read, and his libraries has got every book. I mean, it's if I were to write a book or you write a book, I mean, he'd almost certainly get it and go through it, right, if it was in this field. And his belief was he has such high-end clientele. They want to be doing the newest thing, right? And they want things that are new. he's like everything I go to, even if I learn one new thing, like that's what makes Gunner Gunner. That's what makes him so powerful and why people want to come to him. He's a cornucopia of like everything that he can kind of pull into this, and he doesn't stop learning. And I'd say, do the same. Is that whatever your trade is, like, don't ever stop learning. Don't ever assume you're the best at it. It's okay to be proud of what you do. Just, I would say that if you have pride, period, like, and you aren't, and it's non-deserving, like you haven't done anything really, and only in your own you've done stuff. I think that's the problem. I think we see a lot of that, and so I'd say for students, like, and I'd also say for students, here's something. Here's one that I would add. Um, uh, Learn to use normal cordialities. Like, reach out to people and be thankful for the time they give you. Send a thank you follow up note. Like, those are like, they're smart, much better people, smarter people than me have said this before. And, like, I can't remember who. I remember there's a recent, thing I saw on social media, and he made these points like, don't mess up on the little things. Say thank you, say please, sir, ma'am, whatever it is. Like, if you don't make mistakes where it's unnecessary. It's like unforced errors, I think is what he referred to it was, right? I mean, it's like that stuff, get like the easy stuff right. Like, those are the things. Show up on time, be dependable. Like, when somebody asks you to do something, do it. Like, turn it in on time, like all that kind of stuff. Or if it's harder than you thought, like, communicate in advance on, hey, it's taking me longer. Here's what I'm struggling with, so that, and like those things, like those are the easy things, and stop giving excuses. I mean, that's the one thing that drives like me nuts or other people is like when mistakes happen, and I still make them all the time. Like, just, man, say, yeah, I screwed up on that, and you move on. It's done. It's so easy. It's like, all right, we're past that now, right? Like, let's go on to something else. I don't need to tell you why. I don't need to tell you my toe hurt at the moment, and I started looking at my toe. I mean, it's like, it's all irrelevant. Like, just, own up, be accountable.
It reminds me of something that my dad always tells me, and I don't think he was the one who made it up, but I repeat it to myself probably 3 or 4 times a day, is that 80% of life is just showing up.
No, yep.
And I think that's applicable in every single situation.
Yeah,
Whether
amen.
it's like a job, or whether it's in a relationship, or whether it's to a friend, or as you keep telling me, like, hey, you don't know who that person you're saying, hey, how are you? They might need to know someone's looking out for them.
Sure.
If they're having a bad day. Like, I've been at coffee shops before, and the barista's like, hey, how's your day going? And I needed someone to ask me that. And I'm
Yeah,
like, tough day, but how are you? It's like, and I feel
for
like
sure.
with just the showing up piece, it's huge. And then, like, if you do take those extra steps, and you do say please and thank you, and you are curious, and you do show respect to every single solitary person, depending on no matter who they are, I mean, that just pushes you over the top. And it's funny because with, like, I don't know, like my students and stuff, like it drives me bananas when I get late emails about, oh, I didn't do this, and they'll send me a message that just says, hey, can you open up the quiz again? And I'm like, not like a dear Dr. Axler, or excuse me, Dr. Axler. Like, it's just like, hey, can you do this for me? It's like, no, like, beggars can't be choosers. But it's like, if you are kind and you say, hey, like, I'm curious about this, that goes a very long way. And it's like, that's what I did with you. I had no idea who you are, but we like had, you know, mutual contacts, and you were incredible in, email conversations, and we talked for 3 hours last week. And I'm like, wow, like, I made a new friend. And it was just like the kindness of saying, hey, like, can we please have a conversation? I'd love to learn from you. And that's like the one thing that I urge like my students, is I'm like, please just reach out, say please and thank you, and
Sure.
respect their time.
Amen. Amen. It's super important. I mean, I think that everything we do is just, life interactions, right? And so why make them, combative? Why make them, where, yeah, where it is like one sided. That's going to be the advice you'll probably give your kids as well, right? I mean, whether it's with a marriage, or whether it's through a friendship, or hopefully at work, it should be a tennis match, that's enjoyable to play. It shouldn't be just one side playing dodgeball at you, and with you up against the wall. And so it's got to be that symbiosis of like give and take, and yeah, just those encounters that you have. I don't. There's if you were to ask me about brands that I would tell you about successes and numbers and things because you're just kind of in that mode, and definitely in the years of like having to justify to accountants and investment people. But in reality, my favorite things that I look back at, like, okay, like what will I hope to be remembered for in this industry? Like, doing innovative things, but then like, yeah, the person that I was, like the interactions. I mean, it's because when I think like, I would hope that like a Sylvester Stallone that sees that this is a meeting that, or a chance encounter that I'm certain is long forgotten about. But for me, like that, like his impression of who he was as a person, right? Like, I mean, he would take the time and chat and share about a story when he was doing his workout, and he's definitely got other things going on. And I don't know, man. It's yeah, the simple stuff like that 80-20 rule is absolutely. And I would also extend that to sometimes, and this is like personal psychological advice to myself, because paralysis by analysis is a problem that I have. Just this kind of perfection mentality from my own upbringing, that is a struggle. It's good and bad. It motivates you and it makes you want to do more and, prove something to somebody who never cared anyway. But you're just like, you're doing this. But I will say, like, sometimes like a execution is at least getting something out there and then improving on it is better than waiting to execute based purely on perfection, right? I mean, because you'll never achieve that, and I've been guilty of that. And I would say the same, like that advice for anybody, and that advice, like I need a mirror here just to kick back at me to say, I still have to remind myself of that all the time. Is that it's a huge problem that a lot of people will have that are success minded. I would also say for new people coming out is that your first job isn't going to be your last job, and your first job isn't going to, be all glory of what people might be posting on social media. If your expectation, there's going to be definitely benefits and things. There should be like positive aspects about it, but if you go into a first time job with expectations that this is going to be you're going to be doing formulas and you're going to be doing this and you're going to be I don't know what somebody knew, and the money and the travel and everything else, that it's just like it's unrealistic. I recently had a interview with somebody for an internship, right, and they wanted to come do it, and it was a little bit off from what we were like, from what I have available in the lab, but I was willing to have a conversation with somebody based on a recommendation. And super nice kid. I mean this like sincerely, like just, but I have to use it. I mean, I'm old enough that I can use the term kid, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but where his thinking was of wanting to get into the industry. I asked him a question. People are like, what is it that interests you about this position and the opportunity, like in this field? Every answer, the immediate answers right after that were money, travel, working with like, basically celebrities and it was, and these were all like social media posts, you know, make believe world, right? I mean, and so of like, man, well, you want like Kevin Hart career today with zero of the last 35 years of his working from up the chain of small roles and comedy clubs and everything else that go along with getting to the point where you get the spotlight. You just want the dessert without the dinner, right? I mean, it's without cooking the meal. And so That is one thing I would tell newcomers: just be patient. I mean, and be respectful, like you said. Show up, do the work. It's a fun ride, you know. I mean, some people skyrocket it up, some people grind it out, and everybody wants to be wherever they see the spotlight. Unfortunately, they fail to recognize all the stuff to get to that.
And I think that that really speaks to what you had said a couple minutes ago, is that one of the most important things in life is just always being a student, always reading, always asking questions, and just being humble. Because like I think it was one of my favorite podcasts is Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard, and he's interviewed, I mean, everybody, like anyone who's anyone, like scientist, author, politician, actor, rapper, athlete. And it's so funny because he's just a goofball. And it's funny because I think he interviewed like a past politician or president or someone, and they said, you know what, I've realized in my 50 something years of meeting world leaders and scientists and politicians and thought leaders and scientists is that you probably know a lot about your little individual tiny thing and basically nothing about nothing else. And that's okay. That's the law of comparative advantage. You want to stay in your lane. And my dad has the best way of looking at that. He just made like a will or power of attorney or whatever it was, where he goes, all right, Mike, you're in charge of all my medical expenses when I start to lose my mind, like anything medical decision, that's your job. And he goes, your older brother, it's all about the finances. And I'm like, that's perfect, because I'm not a finance guy, I'm the science guy. And my brother is all about finances. He does not know what a carbohydrate, a disaccharide, monosaccharide is. And I'm like, you got to stay in your lane. And I think that coming out of grad school for, I don't know, 6 years and now being a professor for a third year and then starting this podcast has given me the most beautiful and humbling opportunity to say, you know what? I don't know nearly as much as I thought I did, but this is amazing because now my opportunity for growth is just growing, 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 growing. And it's so exciting. Whenever I talk with someone, I'm like, tell me everything. I want to learn about you. I want to hear your perspective.
Isn't that awesome? I mean, that's like the greatest part. It is so cool to go meet new people and just start asking them, you know, and you find out like what they're doing or what, and just start doing that exploratory, you know, communication. It's the one thing my wife hears this a lot. Like we'll talk to somebody. I try, even though I do talk a lot, and I can have a very bad habit of that. I always, you know, we always finish uh, dinner dates or meetings or interactions with people, and she'll hear a common question I ask is, "How did I do?" Right? I mean, like, I don't want to, I don't want to be the bully pulpit of a conversation. And there's times like you know, whatever ADHD is kicked in like hard, and I'm just like I can't just word vomit, you know, just nonstop. And so, um, but I love asking people questions and listening to and being able to explore like more about what they do. I don't. There's so many skills I don't have that it's so cool to learn about what somebody does. Like, what is this? Because like you want to know about like things I do. There's definitely there's what you see, and then there's like the things that really matter. You know that you go and pick up on once you get in the game and you're like really working it and you understand you know what moving parts matter, and those are the things I usually like you know asking people you know or finding out you know or just you know people love talking about themselves in some way like sharing some story, and so that to me is just always great. You know, it's that again, leave it better than you found it. Just when you have an interaction opportunity with somebody, like take advantage of it. Don't start staring at your watch. Don't like act like you got to go. Like spend time. Like if somebody, it's one of the reasons I like where I'm at in Wyoming. It reminds me a lot of where I grew up, like in the South or back when Texas was a little more Texas, of just people having time to chat with you like this, right? You know, this is one of the first things you notice when you move. When Beth and I moved to LA the first time or the second time, you know, it's just this people don't want to talk to you. And I'm very much a, you know, stand and chat. Somebody asked the other day, you know, we were having a conversation about gyms and it was the same. It was like, man, I could, I could go into the gym down the road. They don't know me to say, from anybody, right? I mean, yeah, their personnel changes over more than what my gyms when I ran, but like we had a very personal relationship with everybody who came in, because there's your morning people, there's your lunch crowd, and there's your 5 o'clock crowd, and there's me, like my type that comes in as late as they can, and they wish you could stay open 24 hours. That still wouldn't be enough time, right? But you would get to know people, and we just don't do a lot of that anymore. And so I try to take advantage of that, probably to my wife and family's chagrin. My oldest daughter definitely is a talker like me, so I think she gathers this. My wife is always like, "We got to go." So it's just, which is good. Probably good balance between she and I.
Well, you had said, and it was funny that you said this. I wanted to circle back to this. Is that a lot of folks with like within our industry, and even if you're like a faculty member at a university, you go undergrad, master's, PhD, and it's like a 10-year thing. Lucky for 10 years if the PhD is only 4 years. And I feel like, I mean, I just got out of it 2-3 years ago. I mean, a lot of love, a lot of respect that I had the opportunity to do that. There's a part of me that almost wishes I had a little bit more experience with different things. And like I shadowed a lot, I've interviewed people a lot, I've asked a lot of questions, I've sent a lot of cold emails, I've done a lot of cold calls in the past 10 years just because I'm like curious. I'm like, hey, can we have a conversation? Like, I just want to know what you want to do. I'm not trying to really gain anything or take your time. I'm just curious. I think that's one of your strengths,
Oh,
is
thanks.
that you love conversation. Like even just like you and I've been talking now for hour and a half today. We talked 3 hours last time, and I'm like, you taking in the information, you sharing stories, you asking questions, you doing follow-ups over email. Like you were following up over email, a couple questions and everything. And I was like, you know what? That's a huge strength, because the more that someone has a fixed belief system of I'm an expert, I know everything, there's no room for growth. There's no room for flexibility. And they're just going to be frustrated when inevitably things don't go their way because there's 7 billion other people, 7 billion other opinions. And I think I'm the exact same way, where a lot of my friends will always be like, Mike, how do you know everybody? And I'm like, well, I don't, but I'm genuinely curious about everything. And I'd rather ask questions than Google it or ask ChatGPT. And I do think that's a strength that you have, is that you're like, oh, I might be a little bit of an underdog in the industry, but I love people. And I'm like, that gives you the competitive edge. You know everybody, and you've asked a lot of questions. You have like a library of knowledge to work with.
No, thanks. Thank you. Well, on that point, I mean, there's probably some, like, going the academia side to industry. It's like always interesting, right? To make it very practical, and we could chat like personal life stuff, for hours. I could, if there's some like pearls of wisdom, industry things that people want to gather, and be like one of the things I didn't even realize when I was running brands, and before I went back and did the PhD, right, was that we would get these, the study, and I hadn't done, other than my master's degree work, I hadn't done research, and so, but definitely not in the nutrition side, definitely not under. And there's so many assumptions you make, and if you don't understand ingredient specifications, quality control, manufacturing, shelf stability, and what ingredients are stable, which ones aren't, you don't understand blending, uniformity issues, you don't understand these things. I mean, there's so many. I read manuscripts, and I'm often just shaking my head like this is useless garbage, because they've made these conclusions, like, and I'll make it generic, but like this ingredient doesn't work, right? I mean, I've heard people lecture like that, and and I mean, on the one level you go, okay, this specific ingredient, whatever it was, didn't work under this setting, this study design, this population, because if you just say this doesn't work or this does work, and if we as scientists become so, yes, no, I think that's a horrible place to be from a longevity standpoint of, like, continuing on that. inquisitive mind of, well, let's see what happens when we change this variable. Let's see what happens if we change this, right? I mean, that is what science is supposed to be, is a building upon to create this, advancement of the field, not just, all right, we have one study and in this population, and whatever study design, it didn't do what they thought. So move on, next ingredient, and that happens all the time. I mean, on the flip side, there's also people who just, you know, intentionally lock on to one study that showed it worked, right? And that's all that matters to them. But there's so many things that go into it. I think I shared this with you before when we were just kind of chatting. Probiotics is a good example. Probiotics are not stable. Obviously, they're probiotics because they grow in they're stable in an anaerobic environment. So expose them to oxygen, light, heat. It's not ideal. So I see probiotics always in powders, right? They're just added in. You're like, if you know anything about manufacturing and you understand the process, I mean, let's just say, and I'm going to say this facetiously, let's just say a company's willing to spend extra on a raw material that is, after manufacturing at the raw material company, processing facility, it is refrigerated. It's kept frozen, kept at refrigerated temperatures. They pay the extra money to do refrigerated shipping, which is rare in dietary supplement or, industry manufacturing. That manufacturer has refrigerated, walk-in enough space to take forklifts in, which again doesn't exist in most. And then after manufacturing, they refrigerate the finished product. They put it in cool, post production storage and keep it refrigerated. I mean, none of those things happen. Ship it to your house, refrigerated. I mean, anybody that's receiving anything from Amazon in the summertime in the South, knows, things get very hot, very humid, right? And trucking. So anyway, I say all that to say that there's a study. I see studies all the time on probiotics or these ingredients that have stability issues, massive stability issues, and or the manufacturing is just complicated from especially if it's a combination, right? To have blend uniformity. And you see these studies and there's zero third-party analytical testing on the finished product, right? I mean, we in laboratories will do ICC, testing on our methods, on our test-retest reliability, both intra-tester and, within the lab, right? I mean, between your different grad students that might do do VO2 testing on somebody, you want to make sure that whoever's analyzing and modifying for like where VT1 or VT2, that it's consistent in your lab and you document that. And you see these things like, okay, what's your ICC for this method? But yet they take face value a product, and they will do a study on it, and then they'll make opinions about whether that ingredient, that finished product, works or doesn't work. But they have never validated that product they bought even meets label claim. Now, there's an argument to be made that purchasing product off retail shelf or having it ordered in, right, where you order it, that's random, and that's what consumers would get, and that's what you're testing. So on a finished product side, I would get that. But to apply that to, let's just say, an ingredient, right? So for people that have sourced, raw materials or ingredients and they don't validate that, that's a problem. People that receive, like every study we do at a university, we will send out to a third party analytical testing in addition to paying a grant, so that they can actually show that, we're meeting label claim. It doesn't contain banned substances. It doesn't contain other things, like nobody's spiking it so it works for this study or whatever, right? Our industry, the applied nutrition researchers in the space, or sports nutrition research labs, have done a dismal job of that. I know I've lectured about this before, so like anybody at ISSN or other places knows, like, hey man, like I've raised this banner many times, that, hey, we need to do a better job. Like everybody should be doing it better. And you reach out to me, I'll happily kind of walk you through, like who are the third party analytical labs you can use? Like how do you do a quality test if you're doing probiotics? I mean, because they degrade over time so rapidly, and you've got, let's say it's taking, you were telling me like you've got a friend that's still collecting data, or like if you had to do that, well, then you better be repeat testing at different time points, because, I mean, vitamins are cofactors. So any of your antioxidant based cofactors are going to reduce over time, just given, right? I mean, that's just, they're doing their job. Probiotics are going to degrade over time. There's other ingredients that will interact. And so like those things are part of that, like having the ability to have done all these different things has given me the ability to look at, like, okay, like, got to take these things in, or this isn't, what I'm doing isn't valid. And maybe this will help like other people who aren't going to invest the time to learn what I've had to learn by trial and error, is that you can pass that on, and they can, and hopefully the field gets better. I mean, that's part of the joy of it. You would hope, right? I mean, so yeah, having the different roles and continuing to learn, and continuing to be told by people like, oh, that's not right, or that's old, there's a new method. Like those are the things you're like, awesome. As I'm doing stuff in the lab, Mike, with the fitness testing now, I mean, it's daunting because, man, I have, I love doing VO2 tests, but like there's so many factors to look at. So as I try to set up a, concierge fitness testing that like our employees and, their family can use for like tracking health, man, I haven't had to go in and look at like what is the, sex, age, categorization, ranking, like what's the normalized, data look like for like an OEUS, for oxygen uptake efficiency slopes. Like what should it be? I got to go back and relearn this stuff all the time. And so, and I think that's good. It's healthy. It's healthy to be like, that's your process, maybe I'm just so forgetful that maybe I can start using age. Maybe I'm just forgetting things, and maybe other people would have like your Rain Man abilities to remember that stuff that they learned back in grad school and apply it. But the data keeps getting better, so you got to go out there. Like nobody wants to see like the body composition, numbers from like, I've got an old, from when I first went back for my master's degree, like an old textbook that had like, the old essentials of conditioning, strength and conditioning, NSCA's first edition, that has, the body fat, percentage, ranking scale versus today, where we've become a little bit more liberalized with giving people a little more cushion. If I'm using the old ones, I mean, everybody's out of shape. So you got to keep going and learning. That's, it's a good advice. That's my, I shouldn't say it's good advice. That's my advice.
Since you've been in the, supplement, bodybuilding, publishing industry for so many years, what are some of like, I guess, the stepwise changes that have occurred? Since like, I think last time we talked a bit about like whey protein, we talked about BCAAs, and you worked with like Scivation. Like what has changed? Because I've seen some changes maybe over the past 5 or 10 years, but you've been in this like really deep diving into this for a while now. What are some of those big hallmark steps where if you drew out a line, you could be like, oh, this was a big thing, this is a big thing, this is a big thing, and maybe what could you think would happen over the next 5 to 10 years, or what do you need to think to happen over the next 5 to 10 years?
Great question, Mike. So I'll try to break it down by a few of those different like key points. I can tell you that like let's focus on publishing for a minute. Like information transfer, I guess we could call it. Like how do you take, information and get it out? And obviously we know most people now are getting it through social media, podcasts, things like that. Different things that they can see on a more audio-visual scale as opposed to just reading. But I will say the magazine world changed dramatically. So publishing 9/11 happened. at just this really interesting, point when the internet was starting to like catch on, right? Bodybuilding.com. So Ryan DeLuca was just so ahead of the time. Most people, the founder of bodybuilding.com, a lot of people don't realize he had this thing called my body space. Like, when MySpace was like the first social media, when internet kind of started, he did body space and the forums he had. I mean, so back in those days, you were magazine, is where you get information. And so the social media influencers were like paid athletes, bodybuilders, fitness people, that so you knew that they were attached to these brands because they were in ads. But and 9/11 came, and a lot of people don't realize this, that like publishing, and maybe they've changed now, but so publishing, most sales happen off newsstand, right? They're not so subscriptions are almost giveaways. You kind of cheapen, but your profit is made off the newsstand. Like those are your extra circ. A lot of people don't realize that when 9/11 happened and they shut down being able to get past a certain point, like you couldn't go into like the gates area. Well, that was the majority when people were waiting for their loved ones to arrive or waiting whatever. They were buying magazines for whatever, and so there was like a huge drop there, and so we saw the industry just took a total change, and then people started gravitating because they couldn't get this information, so they started going online, and that really catapulted it. And you saw kind of that change. So suddenly, information became, that was secondary a little bit to a point. It was a new sales point, right? You started seeing it coming on. Vitamin Shop came into the game at the same time. I remember being at GNC and brought in with a group that we were looking to flip the company, and our head of IT, okay, so we're in this executive meeting, and the head of IT says, I think this internet thing has peaked. I really do, because we're talking about we need more of an online presence, stop investing in brick and mortar stores and malls that are dying out, right? And Vitamin Shop was catching on in sales. Bodybuilding.com was doing a lot of like getting sales. And you get your head of IT saying, like, I think this internet thing has peaked. And I remember me and the new guy, Steve Nelson, had just been brought in, head of marketing. Just kind of looked at each other like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he said that out loud. But I will say, like, internet in that era, that 2001 era, was like one big change. The GMPs that got enacted in 2000, fully enacted in 2010. Finally, I mean, the industry had been asking for this since 1994. So since the advent of DSHEA, Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, we put in like the GMPs, the good manufacturing practices, and like things to regulate the industry better. It finally got enacted in 2007 in large companies, full enactment across the entire, like all companies, 2010. So that was another big kind of step that moved the industry closer, to like being taken more seriously, people doing the quality control in valid, the verification of new materials, the in-process testing, the stability testing is supposed to be done. Now I'll caveat that with saying it's like, if if I go drive out to the gym, there's road signs out here, there's stop signs, there's speed limits. I'm going to choose to follow the law, right? If I take some novel route that I've never taken before, and the speed limit sign's been shot up, by something, or it's covered, and I don't know the speed limit, there's a chance I don't know the speed limit and I speed. And so in either case, you either choosing to break the law and not follow the regulations, or you break the regulations only because you didn't realize them. Once you get a ticket and you find out, then you should correct your pattern. So I will say, like, dietary supplement industry is the same. It's incredibly regulated, but the enforcement is still, just like everything in life is, there's going to be people who ignorantly go about, doing something. And hopefully when they get caught doing something wrong, they course correct. And there's people who are going to intentionally, even what you tell them, are going to choose to break the law because they see it as more profitable. In our industry, if I just being fair, I mean, when I've consulted for a lot of companies and over the years, and sadly, I hate to say, I mean, it does the same in food industry though, food beverage, is that in general, it would be at least 9 out of 10 companies that would be sent to me by people or that would reach out had no idea of the regulations they were supposed to be following as a company. And it's still, sadly, is just what I see is just as pervasive now. So buyer beware. There are certain telltale signs. But I will say 2010 enactment of that definitely kind of started that, the quality side. Since then, there haven't been, any, I would say, major changes in the supplement industry that have really kind of shook it to the core to say that, it's been some monumental change. I mean, I think, if anything, COVID and the lockdowns, probably taught us we need to repatriate raw materials. I mean, there's a lot of outages, but that was across all industries, and you're starting to see things like that pop up. But I'm not sure that's across industries that you've seen that happen. So as far as like major time points, like that's where I would identify. I think there's things to come possibly that might change things. I hope nothing too extreme, but if you look at how it's evolved as far as like, all right, in the actual brand side, like what moves the needle, it's this is just the reality is that it's cyclical, man. We are fashion. I have seen in this industry trends that have repeated three times. I mean, ketogenic dieting, has come along as ketogenic twice now. Once it was called low carb, right? I mean, but it's the same thing. Just so I often use it's fashion, and it might be the bell bottoms, one round, another time skinny boy pants or whatever. I mean, skinny jeans, and so, but it's the same. They just read it. Essential amino acids. This is the second time I've seen it make a big return. Because, and again, the reason is really simple. If you understand the cost constraints that go in, like protein is at all time high, and so like it's expensive, and so what do brands do? They go brands and go and somebody's like, we got to get something out there, but we're not going to compete against these high priced commodity, whey protein. So they do amino acid blends, and then they, will market, oh, how great these are. And if you look at the food industry, right? So people, if it was prior to the 2000s, nobody had in America had really probably heard of or at least not in too many stores ever seen Greek yogurt, right? Most people don't realize that when that came on, I mean, the Chobani folks and the folks behind that, getting that into the American, food supplies, that people weren't consuming as much cheese. They had this really downturn on cheese. So there's a lot of casein. Casein is, protein that in cheese. There's a lot of casein available. They're like, well, what do we do this? Well, you can do Greek yogurt using the casein fraction, and suddenly you have this high protein, yogurt. And I'm not saying Greek yogurt's bad, but I'm not a big casein fan personally. Like I'm a whey fan, so it's like, oh, better. That's not ideal. Those types of trends, kind of come and go. So the protein side, I mean, we're here again. We're getting pushed with plant-based proteins. As you know, as a researcher, you go in and, I mean, from the molecular level, I mean, muscle protein synthesis, and I've done a lot of this with Dr. Mike Roberts out of Auburn. We do a lot of this research on comparing protein source and form. And so, you kind of see these trends where it's whey isolate, it's whey this, it's, and then, it's vegetable protein. And it's all follows the price curve. I mean, and that's the sad reality. And then there's people who truly like to innovate. I mean, I was sitting there doing, these, there's a company, he just recently sold, so Kevin Lawrence had a company called BNRG. It used to, like, the long name was like Bio Nutrition Research Group. I met Kevin after I finished when I was running Muscle and Fitness is when I first met him, and I was in my like earlier in my PhD program, but had yet to do my dissertation. But I was interested in whey and hydrolyzed forms of whey, and there's so many that just there's just a huge range of what you can do, and there's a lot of people who just call it hydrolyzed, but there's just a smart, enzymatic, very heat controlled, pH controlled way to go about it, and then there's just like flash it with high heat and beat it up way to hydrolyze. And so, but Kevin was the first brand really out there with a moderate to high degree of hydrolysis protein called proto whey, PROTO whey. And I met him, was introduced to him by a mutual friend, one of my mentors, a guy named Jeff Feliciano. This guy is just like a savant, no formal, like higher education, but just like this behind the scenes guy who's done some insanely cool stuff. And met him my first time at Muscle and Fitness, and we've been friends ever since. And just a brilliant, brilliant guy, like the evil genius guy who that you always want to kind of tap into on other things to do. But at any rate, I met Kevin, and you find out like people just weren't willing to buy. They're going to go buy some feed bag of whey protein concentrate at Costco for like pennies on the dollar, right? Versus this, definitely more expensive, higher end, whey hydrolysis. If you know anything about like a really good hydrolysis that's moderate to high DH, and especially that uses, endopeptidases and a combination of endo and exopeptidases to intelligently chop at certain intervals in between amino acids as opposed to just chopping the ends, it tastes horrible. So the amino acids are gross, man. Some of them are fine. Like glycine has got a nice little sweet taste, so I've added that to products, to make it a little sweeter, so you don't have to do other sweeteners. But like arginine is gross, tyrosine is disgusting, right? You can kind of go down the list of like different ones that are just horrible. And so when you start making these ends, most large proteins in we call it the bends, right? So when you look at a protein and it folds, is that the corners that face the outside world, there's a lot of proline there. It just kind of has a nice like at that border, and so not a horrible, not great tasting, but also like when you actually consume a full like that, you're not getting a lot of these bitter notes. But when you hydrolyze this stuff, it's gross. My dogs, back when I did my dissertation and I created this, I had this theory that I thought I could modify the whey, and it would improve recovery, but like a lot of the antioxidant properties that other people had shown, I felt like I could do that, the anti-inflammatory stuff. But I also thought that there'd be more metabolic efficiency, more fat burning, essentially. So I'm trying to say that you would get leaner on it, and which we did show that. But I will say, like, that protein tasted so bad, and it's expensive because now you got to like flavor it. You got to like add far more like stuff to it, and then what you run into is people not willing to invest in that. And that's part of like that world, is that we go through these ebbs and flows, and protein is one of those examples that like you saw Kevin was just he had that product out there, kept it out there. The little Power Crunch bars that you probably see, a little wafer, just crazy yummy. That's that brand as well. He just recently sold like a couple months ago. Bravo to him, man. He's finally like living the high life on a golf cart, man. Love that guy. He supported like 7 different studies Mike Roberts and I did. So always very grateful to him. But he had to sit there and do the hard work. People, if people are just mainly going to buy on price because they're like, oh, whey is whey, because we hear all this garbage out there by people who go, it's just amino acids. As long as you get the amino acids, they all get broken down to di and tripeptides. Bullshit. Like that is not true. Like you haven't read like a transcytosis so all these, and so like that's part of like when you say what are the trends. Unfortunately, I don't think the industry has really moved forward in the ingredient realm much at all. If anything, I think it's reverted because all brands now, they're all waiting on the raw material companies to create anything, and they depend on the raw material company to do all the investment and the research. And it's like, that's great. I love raw material companies that do that, but brands have really stopped investing. I mean, Weeder, back when I was AV, we invested a ton in research. Dr. Luke Bucci, one of my mentors, that guy, again, he's like a Yoda. He's forgotten more. And this industry owes that guy a ton because of the things he brought to market. I mean, he was, like I told you last time, he was doing beta alanine and a product with creatine in 1997. I mean, you got to remember, carnosine didn't even become a thing. I mean, I worked on my first book chapter was creatine, and it was Roger Harris was one of my experts that worked on it with me that I wrote for the ISSN, like their first textbook. And Roger's telling me about that in 2000, about this new ingredient carnosine in 2002, 2003, right? So you figure, 5+ years before that, Luke and these geniuses had already figured out this thing looks cool. But these were brands that were investing. Bill Phillips, EAS, I mean, was investing in research. And that really what got me so excited about it when I was in my master's program. You saw like brilliant researchers like Rick Kreider, right, who at the time was at University of Memphis with like Andrew Fry and doing like the original like creatine research. And so, but it was that investment was because of, the brand EAS was pushing, doing more metrics, which is like the first meal replacement, like high protein meal replacement. Like Dr. Scott Connolly, who would invest in research as well as an MD. And then there's just fell off the map, right? And it became, everybody just started looking at raw material companies and everything. And so that's why everybody today, so if I had to say one of the trends that's come back is this whole transparency, full label transparency. Everybody says you got to look for that. If it's not, if there's a proprietary blend, it's just they're just hosing you. And my caveat to that, Mike, is this, right? Is that you only do full transparency if you're not investing in finished product studies, right? If you got a formula and you are investing in assessing the efficacy and safety of that finished formula and you invest in that study, I'm all in favor of proprietary blends, man. Protect your IP so that, because this industry is horrible, man. They're just copycatters, man. They're like, that Temu or whatever, whatever people joke about, the clothing place in China that just kind of knocks off stuff for cheap. This industry 101 is they see a trend, they see something work, and then it just gets flooded by 100 other people who just I'm going to sell it for $1. It's like watching the family or the Price is Right with the a-hole next to you who gives the price $1 lower than you, right? That's their whole scheme. And that's this industry all the time, is that something cool will come out, somebody will do something, almost always right now by ingredients who are launching it. Everybody kind of shoots trying to be the first one with it, trying to license that ingredient because that's what they're doing. And then a lot of flashy marketing. And then people are just going to knock off formulas, right? Because everybody's just doing full transparency and or claiming to do, although they're probably not. I bet if you had the money and can do clinical assay or quality assays of what's actually in it, up to label, up to shelf life, you're going to find there's a lot of people who aren't putting in what they claim. So I will say, like, if the one of the biggest trends I've probably seen is this kind of consistent race to the bottom of investing in the brand. If I could give advice to your listeners that might watch it and be like, hey, well, how do I know what brands to go look for? If the people behind your brand are spending all their time promoting themselves, like in their lifestyles, and like they're the ones that are out there, flashy. I mean, I've got examples I could give, but I won't, just for liability reasons. But like, that should raise a red flag. Like if they're investing so much in, I'm all for people having success, and having a good life. I mean, I'm blessed. I have a nice home, and you know, air, we're about to hit winter, so it's nice to have a home that isn't going to, be broken down come winter time in Wyoming. But there's a difference, as I think everybody who is listening to this probably knows, is that lifestyle and promoting just outrageous. Look who I'm rubbing shoulders with. Look what I've got. My new car, my new house, my new this. Where are they? And where are they investing in research? Where are they investing in like future scientists? I mean, I am so grateful that like my boss, my immediate boss, Mike DiMaggio, or the CEO, Doss Cunningham at Nutribullet, like bought into my belief that, hey, we need to invest in the actual industry itself. I mean, so and give and find like support research, like legitimate research in labs, and support those students as well, because they're the future yous or me, right? I mean, they're the ones that, because you've given the opportunity to do research in this area, like that's what's exciting them. And they're like, they get the exposure, they get to see, they get to play with it and actually see maybe like what works or doesn't under these little, and then they start thinking like, oh man, there's like other things we could do. And this is really interesting. And, and that's what fuels an industry to continue growing and not just stopping where somebody makes money. And so I would say like right now it's frustrating to me in the industry seeing how like social media drives so much and low price of cost of goods and so little research being done by other companies that, in my opinion, and I've been in the industry since, again, before Deshay. I mean, well, I was running gyms when Deshay was passed, and so saw like the first advent of stuff out. But from pre GMPs to now, and I would say I believe now is the worst time to be a consumer, because you're getting flooded with so many self-professed experts that claim, and they're, today it's methyl blue and tomorrow it's going to be, whatever the next trendy thing is, right? I mean, these same bozos were pushing, curcumin, last year, 2 years ago, and before that it was trans resveratrol. Like those were going to save you, right? Like you missing this, or you got, you know, people out there that they do it all by, you know, process of elimination, and they make something evil, and people buy onto this garbage, right? Like, there's a certain somebody, and I know you and I both know who he is. Gets on and says, cyanocobalamin, and he's a classic con man about how they're using cyanide and blah blah blah, and you're like, are you biochemistry retard? I mean, it's uh, like like you should be grateful that your body produces cyanocobalamin. And there's like over 7,000 foods that contain cyanocobalamin. Like, we can have a discussion that, like, yes, I prefer methylated cobalamin as a form of B12, but so let's have that discussion on why it might have more, its pharmacodynamics are better, or how it's used and its actual efficacy. But these people now are able to create such a following, where it used to be in the magazine side, at least, like, you could hate. I mean, I'd sit in. I remember sitting in, like, do you know the IDEA conference? It was like a personal trainer like conference, like International Dance and Education Association or something. But it was like ACE, American Council on Exercise, and NCA. They'd all go to this thing. And I remember it my first time as a writer at Muscle and Fitness in 97, 98, with my little badge, all proud, like going from like running gyms in the Redneck Riviera to I'm like working for Joe Weider. This is so cool. Um, I'm sitting front row, and this guy's referring to muscle and fiction, right? I mean, I'm like, okay, that's horrible, right? But that's the impression. Well, when I came back the second time at Muscle and Fitness, I was running it, and I brought in like Stout and other advisors, Jeff Volek, and all these just amazing people to be on the advisory board, and really bring credibility, to the magazines, as well as do the thing that you have to do, sell product, right? And support the advertisers, but in a way that's not you're not selling out, to sell. And um, at least in the publishing world, there was a certain, just like peer review publication before it became just a money making open access, just to have to claim you have a peer review. At least there was a group of people that reviewed it, saw it, and there was some kind of like, man, this is bullshit, right? And some level of filtration. I mean, now all you have to be is so egocentric and so ignorant of your own ignorance that you are willing to spend some money and get pay for paid posts, and you can suddenly be telling people you shouldn't be taking ascorbic acid, right? I mean, it's like, all right, like, go ahead and try to do an all rose hip extract product with enough vitamin C, to make it into a product. I mean, it's just there are there is so much misinformation, and I use that term, both liberally and I don't like to use it because it's like the catch thing now for people who just don't want to hear something they don't agree with. But there are people that are putting out information purely for likes and to monetize themselves, and they are so ridiculously ignorant. They will never show up to the conferences I go to. They will never sit there and get on the panels that I go to. Like, I'll get up there. I spoke at a conference at Quantico. One of my clients back before I worked full time for Nutribulk was a company called Urpac Muscle Foods. They bought a lot of my old ABB distributors. Urpac is the largest distributor into all U.S. military bases worldwide, right? And then they bought, to get more into sports nutrition, they bought a bunch of my old ABB distributors at one point to get more into this space. And they were a client of mine, and I would go into military bases and I would talk to the DoD, Department of Defense buyers and folks, and just educate them on dietary supplement 101, quality control, a lot of the quality side, banned substances, what is it? Like, can you really avoid them in a natural food? All that kind of stuff. What are the processes? But at any rate, there was one event that I did through this one organization that advises the DoD on what they should and shouldn't bring in. They call themselves OPSS, Operation Supplement Safety. The founder, she recently retired, but Dr. Patty Doister, she means well. And so, but what she would come out of her mouth was so, I'm just going to assume it was ignorance, not intent just to make dietary supplements look bad. There was a conference we went to, she gets up, the DEA's got a rep there. The FDA is there. The FTC, Federal Trade Commission, for claims, and they're there. And then there's other reps. And so she gets up and speaks, and it's a bunch of registered dietitians and other folks. And she's showing this. She always did this. She would show this, diagram of these products on the top row, these different products, and almost always you'd have like several that had like Korean language, writing on it. So not even diet. Some of them were like, droppers. So things that weren't even dietary supplements, in the U.S. But they get them online and they do testing with this one guy who, he's affiliated with Harvard Medical School, and he's constantly like he gets his funding by bashing this industry. How he hasn't been sued, I don't know. I mean, he was the one that did the whole, they did this article, came out, they went right to the media with it before it ever even hit the journals, and about doing DNA testing, in products, and that these products weren't what they claimed. And like GNC's stock fell like rapidly in a day, right? Turns out the methods he used, they were all garbage, right? And they even, it all came out, but nobody made their money back, and this guy is still out kind of doing the same thing. Anyway, Patty gets up there, talks about this stuff, and then she'll show like the banned substances, right, that are in these products. and there's oohs and ahs, and from people in the crowd. And she makes a statement in front of all these people. She's like, and she's very emphatic, man, is that diet, and I'm going to get the words wrong, but I'll try to get as close to what she said. Dietary supplements should never contain banned substances. Everybody, clap, clap, clap. Dietary supplements should never contain microbiologicals. Clap, clap, clap. Dietary supplements should never contain heavy metals. Now, if I'm sitting there like, 4 rows back and I'm one of the presenters to come and I'm watching, the people who actually understand quality control, like the FDA guys, and I mean, they're not making any. They have a game face going. I got a good poker face. Right, comes my time to talk. So I kind of knew this. This was kind of her thing. She would do. So I have my own. I get up and I talk about, I cover all the other stuff on quality control, that it is regulated despite what people say, blah blah blah. And I have my graph, and I got all the banned substances, listed down like the first column, and then across the top I've got like blanks where the products would go, and you can see in the cells you've got the amounts of like banned adrenergic agonists that are banned, like tyramines or whatever, right? And I ask everybody in the crowd, I'm like, so do we agree that like this product should like these products that contain these, and I've got all the references cited at the bottom, that these should not be made available for purchase. Everybody, no, these shouldn't. So like kids should not be allowed to buy these products. No way, right? I mean, it's like uniform. Like you want to see the products, and I probably shouldn't do this. Like there's probably liability to this, or like do you want to see it? Yes, yeah, but you show them. It's orange, it's cuties, because they have adrenergic agonists present in cuties, right? I mean, it's citrus, so you're going to find synephrins are present. You've got any milk, eggs, steak is going to have some level of banned hormone present, right? Because they're naturally occurring. And my point to everybody is, and then I didn't even get into the micro. I had this conversation with her directly offline because I didn't want to embarrass her, to tell her just how fantasy land ridiculous that sounds. Somebody like me, you're like, you don't know what you're talking about. You really don't, and it's crazy how much funding you get. But so anyway, I show this thing and I tell them, like, hey, as scientists, as the educated people in the room, as the dietitians, as the regulatory people, what we should be concerned about is physiological effects and spiking, right? I mean, like these are by definition, dietary supplements they're in the category of foods that the FDA regulates. And so just same as baby formula, right? I mean, baby formula falls under foods, under the food regs as a subcategory. But we have to be either they are GRAS ingredients, generally recognized as safe. They are allowed as far as food, they're approved food additives. Or if there are new ingredients, you have to file an NDIN, a new dietary ingredient application, and they have to be accepted by the FDA. Otherwise, you're not supposed to be selling them, right? I mean, so that's the deal. There's no banned ingredients that should be sold if you're a dietary supplement. And I'm like, so what we should be looking at is like what levels cause, a performance enhancing response and can be identified in urine metabolites. Like that's like investigation for years and years and years for some sports science labs that want to do it. Like keep feeding different doses of certain, banned substances and checking metabolites. And okay, let's see, like, and testing for efficacy on whatever performance variables are important, sprint speed, whatever it is, so that we can identify. Like as scientists, we need to identify what is spiking versus what is just naturally occurring presence. As Dr. Don Catlin, so I always refer to him after I do that, I always go to his back in the early 2000s, back right before the Salt Lake Olympics is really where people started hearing Don Catlin's name, but it was also around the time of Barry Bonds and the, Mark McGuire, the androstenedione, insanity where, senators and we're wasting our tax dollars about cheaters. I mean, like, really, you're like the group that's going to talk to us about like what's ethical? This is ridiculous, but I wrote an article. Side note: I wrote an article at that time and submitted. Nobody would publish it. It was just like as far as cheating. But here we are. A reference. There was an interview. One of the I don't know what you call them, but they do that like long jump, on the skis. They go down the thing and they shoot, and they, in the tuck position. And like our skiers had these suits that cost some ridiculous amount, right? But it gave them a certain number of extra meters. And we're like, and I use that as the example of like, and that was the same year Jamaica had a bobsledding team, right? And it's like, they can't even afford like a training facility. So, like, what's cheating? I mean, like, you're giving them a suit. There's nothing to do with them, and we're okay with that. But God forbid, somebody is taking let's just say testosterone, for recovery or whatever. I'm like, let's just be honest. Anyway, side note. So there was a paper that came out at that time. Dr. Don Catlin was behind it. So he's who eventually founded Banned Substance Control Group, BSCG. If you're familiar with them, is like one of the banned substance groups. Awesome group. Very sad. Oliver, if you're watching, man, again, your dad's amazing. Oliver Catlin is who runs BSCG still to this day and carries on. His father passed away last year, unfortunately. But I fell in love with this guy, and I mean that in the most collegial way, if is that the right way to say that. Because most people, so it was he had tested all these products, he pulled off shelf, and showed these amounts of banned substances present, right, and where they weren't supposed to contain any androstenedione. Almost certainly, if you know manufacturing, especially at that time, this is pre-GMP being implemented in 2010, right? So like cross contamination powder, right? When you fill a bunch of stuff with powder and you start mixing it or just dumping it, anybody who's ever made anything in their kitchen knows powder goes airborne. And so it gets stuck on other stuff. And if you don't have the right cleaning processes, it might get into the next manufacturing, run. Anyway, Don was, just so his he was just a true gentleman in the sense that he wanted to do and talk about things in the right perspective. He said, yeah, even though all these products we tested contain banned substances, is that he talked about the law for drugs and OTCs. There's actually an allowed level of adulterant, and I want to say the number is like 0.01% or something. I mean, I can't remember the exact right now, but he talked about the allowable level, and that's a percentage of the primary active ingredient that's allowed to be. And he gave kind of a quick, and he's like, even he's like, unfortunately, like none of these products that he had tested were at that percentage. They were below the allowed level for drugs. But because the dietary supplement industry has no allowable level, any presence is deemed adulterated, right? And that's a regulatory thing. But you wouldn't know that unless you read, as most people never read the full discussion to find like the little pearls of wisdom that are in there on the findings. And so I always talk about that and show, and then you start saying, okay, what we need to do is a better job as a scientist of like what's a physiologically effective dose, and at what point do we say this is not naturally occurring, this is spiking, right? And so I cut that offline, at lunch that day. I chatted with Dr. Doyster and was like, hey, I hear you loud and clear, we are on the same page. I want my kids, and my grandmother at the time was still, I want my grandmother to be able to buy supplements and feel confident that they are safe to consume, that they have been gone through the regular, the quality testing to make sure that there are no levels of things in there that could hurt her if she used it once or used it over time. I'm like, so I think we're on the same page. I'm like, the difference is like, I don't think I was telling her, I don't think you understand that like all foods have micros in them, right? All foods have, any plant you pull out of the earth has heavy metals present. Our bodies have heavy metals. I'm like, the reality is why Prop 65 that you see like come out of California, is that there's an exemption for water, city water, because it would be in violation of Prop 65 in the state of California, and any agricultural products grown or produced in the state of California, except dietary supplements. Gotta love the irony of that. But and it's like they already know that these things are naturally occurring. And so what I told her offline was, hey, I didn't want to embarrass you, but like that's the thing that we should be looking at is like people need to be aware that these things are going to be what's the safe limit and are these companies following it? Like I'll be a champion with you to go out there. And so I kind of go down this path with you to go back to the people that are taking advantage of the industry, that just, they market well, they say all this stuff. You'll never see them at these things that I go, and I'm like the lightning rod for everybody who hates the industry to say, and I will agree with all of them. Like, hey, I agree. There are bad players out there. Like, there are bad drivers out on the road. I'm not going to take responsibility for all those just because I'm out on the road. I'm like, and I want to do, let's be a voice for doing things the right way. And it's why, like, at Nutribulk, I'm so proud of the fact of what we're doing from a science standpoint. And then the labs, like creating like internal labs that we can do proof of concept as well as the university studies and funding like grad students at other universities. I mean, that's what makes it go forward. And I hope that when you get that baton from whoever it was, your mentor, in my case, multiples, I'm hopeful that, in time, like I'm moving that baton, down the track in a positive way, because I do think the industry needs to keep improving. It's why I went back for a PhD in the first place, right? I mean, it was like, all right, the industry is going to get more regulated, more regulated, more regulated. I want to be the guy there that like, okay, if that's the check off the box, like we need people who understand the research, understand what FDA, FTC wants, and understand. Like, all right, I want to be that guy too. And so, yeah, this industry, as far as changes, sadly, I think it's reverted in some ways, like to having again, the circa 1800s, sideshow bobs of showing up, selling whatever because they're just able to con you, and the classic snake oil salesman stuff, and they're just trying to do it on the cheap, and that's a sad reality, I mean. And that it's sad. I mean, we see the same thing across so many things. But as far as the sport, I'm not as involved in the bodybuilding as I was back then. I will, and this is probably an old guy thing to say, is that I feel like the time I was at, Muscle Fitness, my first time was like, I would say it was like a golden era. I mean, everybody, they wanted a Weeder contract that meant something. You had the Super Bowl, all this kind of stuff. But everybody says that, decades later, I mean, everybody refers to the Arnold era as the golden age, but was it, for them, it definitely was, so, but I haven't seen in that space, a lot of changes that to me are anything. I think if anything, the training is diversified so much. There's so many more other avenues for people who, okay, I don't want to be Ronnie Coleman up on stage, huge. I want to, you've got CrossFit games or High Rocks or whatever it is. I mean, I love that. That's the part that's like so cool to see. I mean, I think Joe Weider would just be over the moon to see how things have just, there's more competition. My daughter and I, every time we go back to Salt Lake, it's like, or we go to a new town, if they have, a Ninja Warrior place you can go and do, like, I'm like, it's so cool is that fitness has taken on this far more, interesting aspect as opposed to just pushing weight, which I still love, just pushing weight to push weight, but it has diversified in a way that's so cool. So,
it's so, I guess, refreshing to hear you say that with everything that you said in the supplement industry, because I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse that we're so involved with science both on the nutritional standpoint, the exercise standpoint, and the need and the love to publish, research, read, ask questions. Because I haven't stopped getting this over the past 10 years, and you probably haven't stopped getting this the past 20, 30 years of like, oh, does it bother you when you hear this health claim? And the answer is always going to be yes, but it's kind of like at a certain point, you kind of got to like brush it off. And I hate it now because it's like, I love the fact that gyms are packed. I think that's a wonderful thing because people want to exercise. Like I remember being a little kid and they'd ask my parents like smoking or non-smoking inside of a restaurant. And they don't really do that because for the most part, everybody knows smoking cigarettes is bad for you. Please don't do that. But it's like gyms now are packed. And I think what bothers me now, and this could be like a political thing to say, is that so many people almost want to use different drugs for recreational uses that they shouldn't. So even something like Ozempic, it can be wonderful for someone who truly needs that, needs to be prescribed that for what is it, like blood pressure lowering medication, but in general, it helps like lower appetite. So, and it's just like, I hate people abusing that when they don't need to. And like now they're coming up with drugs, which basically gives you the same effect of exercise without having needing to exercise. And like, I hate to see that because I'm like, there's so many wonderful benefits to having a nutrient dense diet and to exercising and setting goals and the social aspect of it. And seeing all this in my head, it bothers me. And then, and my students ask me, oh, what do you think about, this supplement or this diet or whatever? And it's like, to be honest, I'm not as tuned in. So I might not be the best person to answer that. But for you on the front line, it's funny when you're like, yeah, a lot of these folks don't show up to the conferences you show up to.
I can remember the very first, it was called an NPA conference. It's down in like San Diego area. It was the very first one that was done. And I can't remember the year. I was at GNC at the time. I was at GNC, so it had to be like 2002, or maybe I was right. I was still running the brand, ABB brand. One of those times, around the 2002, 2004 era. And there was a product out there called creatine serum, and so it was in a dropper. And this guy was claiming, and tell me if these claims don't sound familiar to other people who, faster absorption, lower dose, blah blah blah. I mean, for a thing that's like 97%, bioavailable already in its, powder form. And safer, no side effects, all the usual junk. Roger Harris, again, who I mentioned, is friends with. So actually, I know when this came out. I was running the ABB. Oh, yeah. So I was running ABB at the time and had all my distributors, and I had created an ABB science newsletter, right? And so I was going to have like training stuff and nutrition stuff and supplement stuff. Obviously, it was going to help promote our stuff. But I was going to have like legit. So I was taking like things that we were doing at Muscle Fitness Concept of like research bites. I had some people write articles, on science things and then. But one of the things I was going to do is like to call BS on products that were out there that were just pure scams. So this was my first one. This was probably in 2002. Had the publication all ready to go because we sent it out for third party assay. Creatine, if you're not familiar, it's not stable, and we had tested to show like what's in the bottle is just garbage. It had converted, metabolized over, and so it was just wasn't what you thought you were buying. And so when in the newsletter, we included all of the assay data and repeat, and we bought from like multiple locations and blah, blah, blah. And that guy did show up to that NPA event. And we were like, Roger Harris is there. I mean, like Jeff Stout was there. Anthony Almada, who was like original metrics guy back in the day. He was there. And I can't remember who the other researchers that were involved, but this guy got up and talked about serum creatine. I think he was thinking he was going to be just, selling to people. And man, it was like you would just come out of like the posse had showed up for like, the gang that had stolen from the bank. I mean, we were just blistering him with all of the BS, right? I think that honestly is the last time I recall being at a conference where one of the clowns showed up and thought they could hang with the people doing like the real hard work. And um, yeah, that's a whole side note conversation about that whole thing. Uh, but yeah, I'll give this. There's my advice on when you see other people posting stuff. I always have to question myself, like, does it matter? And is it hurting anybody? I use this example because I can personalize it maybe a little bit better. Is when I was first getting into this and at gym, running the gyms, personal training. This is, pre Deshay. This is, 1993 to 1997 in Pensacola, Florida. And so, like, there was no social media stuff out there, but, you could see people would buy space on late night TV and do advertorials, infomercials or whatever. And I was new to it, and so there's an ego, like, I think I was like in the second graduating or third class of CSCS certifications, and so I thought I knew everything, and so young in that regard. I asked people stuff, but I was also trying to like create my own path. And I can't remember what it was. At some point, sometime between then and seeing like there's a book, Body for Life, came out. There's Bill Phillips is one that really launched EAS and the whole thing. And so sometime between that experience in my early in the gyms and in the mid 90s to Body for Life, I had some growth, and I had come to a realization I don't care what anybody does, like from a fitness standpoint. If it gets them doing something more tomorrow than they did today, right? Like, I mean, if that's something they enjoy and it gets them off the cat. I mean, I used to use the example of Richard Simmons. I mean, if Richard Simmons and his weird whatever, DVDs that he sold or whatever, if that got you moving off the couch, like more than doing nothing, I don't care. Like, I really don't. Like, I mean, like, do something more and like progressive overload, like whatever that is that you get enjoyment out of. And so I will say that like when I see people doing stuff, I have to first kind of check myself. Does it matter? Like, is it allowing them to do something they wouldn't otherwise do? Now, I'll give you an example on the supplement side where this comes in. I've often, challenged people at the lectern, who don't like dietary supplements, and they say it's not necessary. Like, I just need food, just need food. Now, they almost always have been at a scientific conference, happens in the morning, there's free coffee, and they almost always have a cup of coffee there. And so my go-to is, why are you drinking a cup of coffee? Right? It's not necessary. You got a good night's sleep, you eat right, well, I need my coffee. I'm like, yeah. Like, so it's very much a Sylvester Stallone over the top, the horrible movie where he arm wrestles or whatever. But he had that whole saying that, I turned my hat backwards, it's like an engine turning on, I mean, and it's like, hey man, if that's what a pre-workout does for you, or an energy drink does for you, or whatever it is, or coffee, and it doesn't hurt you, like we can show that there's no adverse safety effects, either acutely or chronically over time, man, more power to you. Like, if that's what flips your switch and gives you your Sylvester Stallone over the top moment, go for it, man. Now, if there's no data on the product and you take it all the time and you believe you need it, I'm like, like, you should probably test that. You should probably check, just make sure you're not consuming stuff that's going to hurt you. So I do have that principle. When I was with a company called For Life, which was a large, direct selling company, an MLM company. They own two of the patents, things I created. I will say, like, I was like probably rare. I was like the science fitness guy who would go out and talk to everybody who showed up, right? Like, I just wasn't your white hair guy who stood and liked everybody applauding and the thousands. I still just love people and I want to help. And so, but what I saw is there's so many of this kind of, that direct selling is so much as telling somebody how it works. And if somebody tells you that something works and you trust that person and you want it to work, mean, it's why we do placebo effects, right? I mean, 70+% of the time, it's going to work. I mean, like mind over matter. I mean, and so you believe enough, you can move mountains, right? I mean, and so, and again, I'm like, well, the science side of me says, well, that's not good. Like, you got to show that it works. This other side of me says, does it really matter? I mean, if it doesn't hurt them and they believe it's what helps them, then, and if I'm like, if you can say that that product has been tested and shown that it meets all the quality requirements, and chronic use of it isn't going to cause any adverse health effects, that even if there's like from a performance standpoint it does nothing, like, should I care? Like, I mean, personally, would I take it? No. But should I care to the point of losing my mind? I'm like, nah, I'm not going to do that. I mean, and so I do try to check myself on that. I mean, I give you a funny story on that. I mean, about trust. I think I might have told you this before, but when I was in my PhD program, I was consulting. Stout let me continue doing consulting because I'd gone from industry back, PhD and research. Had my research assistantship and my whopping, $16,000 a year or whatever it was, but not quite. Not quite capable of providing for my family. My oldest daughter was, like 6 months old when we started. So I had this one client, Biotest. Love this guy. Tim Patterson's got this brand, and he's just crazy creative, and he was just always kind to me. And I'd either get blown up and have like phone call that lasts forever, and he was the type that asked just a ton of questions. Like Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss was another consultant for him at the same time, so we've worked together on products since long ago. Some cool stuff launched through there, and at any rate, I'm in the lab with Dr. Jordan Moon, and we're doing something in our office which had like the DEXA, and we did a lot of body comp, and we were training somebody. At any rate, I got this package in earlier in the day from Tim Patterson from Biotest for a new product that we had been working on, and it had a blank capsule. So there's an empty capsule, it didn't get filled, in production, and I just immediately, oh, I know what I'm going to do with this. I can't remember what the other product was that we actually that was actually in there, but I had one blank one. That was 2-piece hard shell had been closed. So we're in the lab, Jordan and I's office, and this one undergrad really liked this guy, Mike. He is assisting us on these things, and he comes in, and I'm like, hey, Mike, I got something for you. It's a new product that we're working on at Biotest, and I make this up. It's nano compressed nitric oxide. Man, this stuff's going to give you the craziest pumps. I give it to him, and I'm like, tell me how you feel after next time you use it. He's all excited, right? Fast forward, I've got people in the lab. Again, he comes in from training like biceps. He's got like his tank top, and he's just raging how jacked he is. Man, this stuff's going to be the best. It's going to sell like crazy. Okay, now I actually feel bad. Like, this is where maybe I'm not the best person. I gave it to him as kind of a joke. Didn't expect him to come say what he said in front of so many people. Anyway, I go to Mike Roberts, Dr. Mike Roberts, he and I did our PhDs together. And we go into the lab he's in, and he draws this picture. I create a logo and a bottle like on this whiteboard, and I go back. I get the undergrad Mike. I'm like, hey, Mike, can you help me with the name of this product we're working on? And he take him in the lab, and he's looking at it. And he's like, oh, I like it. That's a cool name. I'm like, well, say it out loud. Like tell me what you think. And he says it. N-O, placebo, right? And I'm like, Mike, say it out. And he's like, placebo. I'm like, Mike, and I tell him this. And here's the sad part. I said, Mike, this is, here's the education part. I'm like, Mike, this is the learning lesson. You trust me and Mike Roberts on anything we give you, you're probably going to believe it's going to work, or whatever it is. I'm like, there is nothing in this capsule. I don't remember my exact words, but I was kind of using it to help teach them why we do placebo-controlled trials and why it's so why influence matters, right? Like, because he was a smart guy, man, and he was like really into it. He'd get into literature. He knew this stuff. I'm like, it doesn't matter how smart you are. If you believe something's going to work and you get it from somebody who you truly trust, then it's probably going to work, or you're going to think it does. And I'm like, so there's the lesson. Now, sad reality is I didn't see Mike. I didn't see him again for like weeks. I don't know if I hurt his feelings, or embarrassed him. We still talk to this day. I mean, I reached out, hey man, sorry, didn't mean to. I hope I didn't embarrass you. But I see that all the time. It's one reason why I don't like doing like just open label studies. It's why I absolutely despise like in a company when you are going to launch a product and their whole idea of we beta tested it is they make it and they give it to other employees who know what it is and they know what it's supposed to do. All right, 70% of the time it's probably going to work, because they need it and they're big fans of whatever. So I'm not a big fan of that. I mean, so yeah, I mean, so believing something works as long as it doesn't hurt you. I'm kind of okay with that. The point you were making, just as a driving credit, there are things that clearly out there I get really frustrated with. Companies that skirt the laws and make it hard on everybody. That almost certainly, like just like that Patty Doister, like they're gonna anybody who wants to bring the industry down and take away rights and access, they're going to use those as examples. And sadly, that is what most of us see because they don't spend money on the things that actually matter. They spend it just on the marketing. So they're overspending to get eyeballs. And then we all, we all end up suffering the consequences because of people like that are doing. So I do have times where I have to first check myself, make sure it's not like a big deal. But then, yeah, there's times I lose my mind, and then probably the thing that I probably lose my mind on most is just the fact that I shouldn't say nobody, but so few people nowadays have any concept of history. I swear I need to go back to some of the other people who've been around as long as I have and longer and write like a history book of like products that have been out there and things that have been done because all we're doing is recycling. And unfortunately, and even recycling marketing strategies, they're like, man, these things, it's not that they can't work this time, but there have been so many examples of companies that have followed these same paths and that is like as they go down the path to oblivion. And it's like if you don't know history, then you're bound to repeat it, right? And so I see so many products coming out and people claiming that this has never been done before. Yeah, it has like 2 times before.
You should write up like the cyclical nature of dietary supplements. That would be a great paper. That could be the title, The Cyclical Nature of Dietary Supplements.
Yeah, there'd be some easy examples of things we could show that just kind of keep making comebacks. So yeah. So
I was chatting with Eric Hillman a couple weeks ago and
love Eric.
It was such a wonderful talk and he's just a funny guy, knowledge like crazy around the gym owning business and the supplement industry. And one thing that blew my mind, and I guess like I'm very naive to this and like I don't know too much. And I mean, I trust you on this, I trust Big E on this, is that a lot of companies will actually just buy out their competitors, like, buy in bulk, and they'll just slap a new label on it or just use a different bottle with a different color. And he goes, and I said, is that true? He goes, yeah, it happens all the time. He goes, why not? And because he gave me some figure as far as like how many supplements are on the shelves right now or on Amazon if you want to buy it. And it's bananas to think. And a lot of my student athletes who play Division I will ask me, what should I take? And I'm like, first of all, talk to your doctor. Like I can't prescribe anything by any means, but I mean, whey protein's great. Creatine's great. A multivitamin's great. Look for NSF certified, informed choice, informed sport. It's a good thing to read up on or go read some research papers. The fact that it's not very hard to fall for that, like, oh, click the link in my description for 20% off. And it's just like, oh, like this goon has his own protein powder. Just click his little thing in his description. And people are like, oh, yeah, it's great because he takes it. I'm like, oh, my God.
Yeah, so there's very few companies that actually have their own manufacturing facilities so that they're doing their own stuff. So most all companies, Nutrabolt included, right? I mean, it makes more sense to use contract manufacturers. So a place that has we have contract manufacturers that we qualify for doing powders, or we have a contract manufacturer that different contract manufacturers that we qualify for doing our carbonated beverages, right? I mean, and so um, and most everybody does that. What I'm seeing a lot of right now is these, and really it's contract manufacturing. They're the thinnest margin typically, so profit margin in between what the materials they buy to what they turn around and sell, and they're also by the site of the most kind of egregious mistakes, right? Where they aren't following the GMPs. Because here's how they get around this. Well, anyway, to get to Big E's comment is that contract manufacturers they don't have science people there. Like their R&D department is what I refer to as an applications lab. In other words, they just make things taste better. That's really it. There's only a handful of really good contract manufacturers out there that have like legit process engineers and tech transfer people that truly understand like how do you make sure that like this is optimized, that you're not just doing process of addition, like when you're doing powders, that you're not just, all right, we don't care about like particle size, and if you know anything about flow, and when you put these things in blenders, and you open it up at the bottom to put it in the totes at the end, I mean, there's going to be tunneling, and then when you dump that tote, you're going to fill up into bottles, depending on the hygroscopic nature or the particle size. All you've had to do is go to the beach and out to like a rock yard and grab different rocks and sand and put it in something, and then turn it upside down and watch how things flow out, right? To know that particle size matters, its moisture level matters, it's, how coarse it is, because it can, and then, any kind of positive or negative charge that might be on there, on how it kind of binds to things, and the static nature, to know like things don't just come out perfectly. And um, but there isn't there's only there's more in this, but like in my career, there have been so few contract manufacturers that take the time to truly understand process engineering. Almost all that I've ever gone into or asked to see their master manufacturing records, like how is it made, and like how long do they mix it in the blender, and do they do addition, at different, like do they add things at different times, and how did they verify that, and let me see your in process quality. Like they're just so rare, and so they almost all just mix it for 15 minutes and they call it a day, and like V blenders that are really made for mixing cement. Um, and unfortunately, there's so many of these places pop up because it doesn't take a huge investment to have a contract manufacturer, and they're not investing in all these extra personnel that actually understand like flavor science beyond, oh, this is bitter, let me add some sucralose and ACE K. Oh, this is still bitter, let me add some more sucralose, let me add some more. And they just keep doing that garbage, and they don't even understand like thresholds of safety on these non-nutritive ingredients. So it's all I call process of addition, right? And the but they'll do white label formulations. Like they've determined, they buy enough bulk, they make them in these, and then now they're just putting other people's labels on them. So like you can go, Mike, you could go have your own brand, the Dr. Mike brand. You go, there's so many of these places, and if you don't know the regs, if you don't understand the regulations and how much you're liable for, you just sign a PO, purchase order, pay your invoice for your minimum quantity order of, 20,000 units of Dr. Mike's. And you just got to figure out how to sell it, right? You got no testing, no specifications. They'll stamp a two-year shelf life on it, but never do any testing on it, right? But it's actually the FDA would say that's all your fault, because you don't actually, like, you're liable for it, not just them, as the brand holder, the one putting it out there to consumers. But those things are popping up everywhere. As far as brands buying other brands and just slapping theirs, I mean, probably I'd say it happens in a little bit different way, or at least what I've seen. Maybe something's happening that I'm not aware of. What I've seen over the industry in my time is that brands will get bought, and then by efficiency, the bean counters that be would be like, well, we've got this brand, and we've got, but this is our brand that we really has more shelf space, and this one only has one product that does well. Let's just take this formula and put it in this brand under this brand label, right? I mean, now that happens. Definitely seen that. Here's in this industry, and I often say this is a good thing. Like, you should pat yourself on the back. Like, brands, there's very few brands that are known for like multiple products. They almost always are known for one hero product, right? Like Muscle Tech back in the day was Hydroxycut, right? You probably don't remember, there was a company called Cytidine, which theirs was Xenadrine, another like ephedra, caffeine. EAS was Myoplex, but they kind of branched because of the science. I mean, they were the one phosphagen, the first creatine and sugar product, and but really they became a Myoplex brand with the meal replacement. The ESN was NOx Explode, right? I mean, and so you can kind of go down the list of brands that usually get one product. C4. So it came out of the Cellucor brand, right? So Cellucor was the brand, but C4 became the hero product, and now it's a brand all by itself. Innovation was Extend. It had other stuff, but that BCAA category, pat on my own back. So I created the intra workout category concept as far as a name. People were doing it. I borrowed a Joe Weiderism of watch what people do and then put a fancy word to it. So intra workout recovery. And now there is no Civation brand. It's Extend, right? Because of that. I say bravo, man. Like, you've been successful at one like huge hero product. Dance with the one who brung you, as a Southern guy would say, I mean, and don't try to go dancing with other dates. Like, focus on what you're really good at. But what most of these brands end up doing is they have success, and then they themselves don't want to buy other people's products, and they just start wanting to add more stuff. And just like Dance with the One Who Brung You, man, they take their eye off the really, the prize, the person they came to the dance with, or they got them there, and they start going, well, maybe we could, this crowd over here, this is kind of a trendy crowd. Let's take this and set it over here. And I'm always like, man, the way you maintain a brand and the brand equity is you want it to grow to where it eventually, these people gravitate towards it, like in the solar system of a black hole. Like, you want to suck them in, not go, because you're just going to leave these folks behind. I mean, every brand, Myoplex is a great example, to use EAS, who doesn't even exist anymore, right? And like Sean Phillips, Bill's brother, he funded my first study I did when I went back to OU, and Sean's a great guy. I've known him forever. Well, known him since then, and just wonderful guy. But you look at EAS, and when they decided they wanted to take Myoplex and EAS that had this like very guy science bodybuilding crowd, who, remember, he had Muscle Media 2000, he's writing about, he had Dan Duchesne in there talking about steroids. Now suddenly he comes up with EAS Results, this little feminine little drink, and it's to appeal to it. They got Cindy Crawford, kind of towards the end of her career, and these other, because they want to appeal to grandma and your mom. It's like, man, like, the sports nutrition industry is college age men and women predominantly fuel that, at least like, and into that 30s. I mean, I wish I could say that like I'm relevant at my age, but the reality is, like, the trends are set by that crowd, and it's like, these kids don't want to take the product that's being marketed to grandma. Like, I mean, that's just, you just killed your brand. And so yeah, the way brands work, and right now, like a lot of these brands, it's all knockoffs. I mean, I see it time and time, and I'm starting to see like these same trends of what people are saying. They're talking about whey isolates, or they're talking about this, and they're totally ignorant on process and the things they're saying. But I remember people's marketing that stuff back in the day. Protein. Here's one of my favorites. Like, you can tell, like, don't buy this protein if you see this. And it's still, I'm just shocked at who does it. They're like, this our protein, our whey protein's undenatured. Everybody else does, this, and it denatures the protein. We're like, okay, right there, you don't know garbage about like the two things that all protein has, because they all go through pasteurization and clarification as milk, right? So when it's still in its full milk form, they'll pasteurize it. So that's the heating process, right, to kill microbes. I I buy raw milk, local dairy. Just FYI, I mean, like, I still believe in that. But commercial available whey protein powder all comes from pasteurized milk. Clarification is where you make it look nice and in solution. It's all evenly colored white, because as you've seen, like, if you've ever seen raw milk and it separates because the fat, and the protein, and the water don't mix, right? And so you got to shake that stuff up. Well, nobody wants to buy that, and so they clarify it and they pasteurize it. Well, those two things, is all literature will show, actually denatures it more than most things. So every product's been denatured to some degree. And so whenever I see people like marketing that stuff as a way of, again, fear mongering, ours is this and more natural, and they're just making up BS. That does light me up a bit. And I have been known to to comment and get blocked on a lot of people's things. There was a brand out there that, one of the first ones that started showing, when they started posting their third-party analytical results, right? You'll probably be able to figure out who this was, but when they first came out, these, if you don't know anything about analytical testing of finished product specs, then yeah, this would impress you. It's just a piece of paper. It shows like some certain things on the left. It shows like, down, and theirs back in the day, I still actually have, like, I saved this stuff. This is how, like, weird I get, like, with saving old, like, things I've posted and commented on, just God forbid ever it comes back to haunt me. But like, you look at it, be like, okay, pass, pass, pass. All right. But then you say to yourself, wait a second. They have no criteria, like, they don't give the criterion method, so they don't tell the method down, like, what are they using to test it. They don't tell you what range, not less than, not more than. So there's no range. And what is the actual amount that's present, right? Like, I mean, if they give you an allowed range, because like every product, you're going to do an overage on certain things, and so it's going to test over, but you want it to be within this range. Just don't want everything over, right? If you're doing caffeine and you do an overage and it tests and it's like, oh yeah, this passed, it's over 200 milligrams, which is on the label. Yeah, it has like 800 milligrams. Like, I mean, that would be bad. At any rate, they used to just do this like really garbage, and all they would show is the micros, the heavy metals, and what's called an FTIR, an IR test, which I won't get into the specifics about how pathetic that is as an identity test, but it's ridiculously pathetic. And they've improved. I will give them credit. Like, I used to blast them. I'd get on, like, see them post, and I'm like, everything about them being transparent. And I'm like, this is transparently garbage. Like, if you know anything about this, like, and the lab they were using had been busted for dry labbing. That's where dry labbing is an expression in the industry where they just write results. They don't actually test it, right? And so there was an old, I think it was on 60 Minutes or something, or 2020. They got busted. It was this place out of Tucson, Arizona, that got busted years ago, and they had this news thing on it, and they just changed their name, like, new LLC name, and that's who this company was using as their third party. I was aware of them as I was in Utah at the time, and they had come trying to get, like, the place I was working with to qualify them. They couldn't meet our qualifications, so I'm assuming they were still, our quality team rejected them, so I'm assuming they were still dry labbing. But but that kind of stuff does light me up because I see it out there, and because they take advantage of the ignorance of everybody, and because it's so easy. If I go take my truck in, I don't know anything about trucks, man. And they tell me I need a flux capacitor. Uh, but okay, like how much does that cost? I mean, where's it go? Like I don't know, man. And so we're at the mercy of people we hope we can trust. So yeah, there's times I'll light it up, man. I've been blocked by certain accounts, so I think that's a badge of honor.
Well, I think, to kind of round that out, it's also the job of an honest scientist. And that's what I urge like a lot of my students to do is just play the part of the honest scientist. Don't spread a bunch of misinformation that you may not understand, you may not believe in. Question everything. Question anything that I say or anything that you hear on this show or any other show. It's go, oh, like, what do I think about that? Well, look it up and see if there's any scientific backing, any data. And that's what you're doing as an honest scientist. So I would take that as a badge of honor that you're being honest about that.
Oh, appreciate it. Hey, is there any technical stuff that you want to learn, Mike? I mean, I don't mean to. I just looked at the time. I was like, oh my gosh, I have like rattled on for you. So I think I told you this before, is that I've never been accused of being like a man of few words. Mike Carlson used to tell me there's the great, Reagan was a great communicator. I'm the great over communicator. So, but is there anything in particular that you wanted to cover that might be specific that people you might want to learn?
I think this was great. I do want to have you back on to talk about more of your research in the future. Would you be okay with that?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, it's always great chatting. So happy to do it. And we got some cool stuff coming up. I showed you the one that we're starting next week. So, um, yeah, and then the things that we got going on at the universities, always cool. I've got some new ingredients coming out in 2026. Super excited about those. Got to keep those hush hush, but they'll be kind of making their faces known, early in maybe before the end of the year, but early in 2026. So yeah, so super cool.
Where can people keep up with all the work that you're doing?
So all my social media is just at Dr. Chris Lockwood. So Dr. Chris Lockwood. And so whether it's my LinkedIn or whether it's my Instagram account or Facebook or Twitter, X is just at Dr. Chris Lockwood. I do have a website, drchrislockwood.com. I don't want to say this too loud because my wife's out here somewhere, but that I've paid for that I've yet to. Actually, it's still in Latin, because I don't have the time to sit there and do that. So hopefully, if you got any listeners who like to do social media and website stuff, man, yeah, contact me, Dr. Chris Lockwood. You'll find I would happily chat with you on bringing that out, so I could actually market stuff. My YouTube stuff's Dr. Chris Lockwood, so I don't post a ton there, but I've started trying to be like, okay, I should probably start dropping some more stuff there.
Oh, this was awesome. Thank you very much for coming on today. This was great. I'm excited for our next chat about whatever supplements you're dropping in the next couple months, and I'll be excited to try them out and everything.
Cool. Yeah. No, thanks so much, Mike. Appreciate you. So it's been lovely chatting with you, man. So always cool. And you've got